Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Chief Operating Officer of S&R Foundation, Kate Goodall.
Why, thank you. And hello and welcome to the kickoff for the 5th cohort of the Halcyon Incubator. And also hello to those joining us on Facebook Live. Everyone say hi over here. Hi, thank you. So as John mentioned, my name is Kate Goodall. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at S&R Foundation. I'd love to get a quick sense for who you guys are. So now as an entrepreneur. Okay. Who is an investor? Okay, raise their hands a little lower. That's interesting. And who wishes they had the money to be an investor? Yes. Okay, good. That's helpful. Excellent. So it looks like we've got a stellar group. It's incredible to look back to the fact that we launched Halcyon 2 years ago today. So we are 2 years old. Are you ready to sing happy birthday? We're very excited, we're very proud, and as you know, our goal with Halcyon is to take the most incredible early stage social entrepreneurs in the world, bring them to Halcyon and help them to accelerate their impact. And in just those 2 years, we've taken 32 ventures. They have collectively, they've done the work, raised $10 million. They've created over 170 jobs, and they've impacted 200,000 lives around the world. Thank you. Yeah, it is incredible, and the success of this program is in no way proprietary. We actually do pretty little compared to this community. It's the people in this room who have committed so much time and energy and money, and we want to thank all of you for everything that you have done for the fellows in this program. Thank you very much. From our incredible pro bono partners at Deloitte, Arnold & Porter, Sage Communications, and Amazon Web Services, to all the mentors and the leadership coaches who work directly with the fellows, this is a success that we can all share. Thank you very much. And it's the importance of the success of the fellows that you're about to hear from, and that has never been greater. If successful, this cohort of fellows is going to change the world. They will create a world where students from all backgrounds can get the loans that they need to go to college. They will create a world where a smallholder farmer in East Africa can thrive by selling crops to their own community. They will create a world where we'll have resilient coral reefs for our children and grandchildren to continue to enjoy. Or to put it another way, we didn't all take time here to hear about the latest dating app. This work really matters, and we could not be more proud to welcome this group, perhaps our most talented yet, to this incredible legacy we're creating together at Halcyon. One quick note. Please turn your cell phone ringers off if you haven't already done that. Thank you. We really appreciate you checking. And without further ado, I am very honored to introduce the first fellow that you'll be hearing from today. His name is Gary Mao, and his venture is called Root Studio.
Thank you, Kate, for the great introduction. As she mentioned, my name is Gary Mao. I'm a founder at Root Studio, where our mission is to work with rural artists to help them digitize their art, to help them discover the true value of their works. But to explain to everyone what I mean by that, I want everyone to first imagine a world in which every time you met an artist that was talented but struggling, you just went up to them and told them, just give up. Stop doing what you're doing, go to a city, find a real job, something like that, right? All the galleries here in DC, we would have nothing on the walls to see. Every radio station would be blank, and I see a lot of people just dressed up. We'd probably be wearing all the same thing, just like the exact just clothes just draped on us, right? As weird as that may sound, and as tragic as that may be, that conversation happens implicitly to millions of rural artists in developing economies around the world. More so than that, the artisan sector is the second largest employer of people in these developing economies, period. In India alone, we're talking 200 million, 2/3 of America worth of people who rely on the craft sector to support their livelihoods. And given that, there are, granted, thousands of craft ventures who attempt to address livelihoods. But so many of them, most of them, in fact, fail because they can't manage the cost complexities of the rural-urban supply chain. In fact, the most well-intentioned craft ventures are delivering less than 5% of the profits back to these communities, which is not enough. We at Root Studio believe that 5% should be 50. And we have created a system to do just that, to reimagine the entire value chain by providing computers, scanners, and intellectual property training to these communities to turn their one-time physical pieces of art assets into perpetual intellectual property in digital form and monetize it in brand new ways. For example, we work with fashion companies to license rural pattern work to create apparel, of which every sale will generate royalties back to these communities. We charge usage fees to interior decor companies who reproduce that art on the walls of their client spaces. Since our founding, we have worked with over 300 of these types of clients, employing on a full-time basis almost 100 artists, effectively more than doubling their income since they've been joining us. Our goal in the next 2 years is to expand from the 5 states in India that we currently operate and get to all 29 states across the country and even beyond India, to onboard over 1,000 more artists and to be bringing back over $1 million a year back to these artisan communities. We are currently looking for product manufacturers, designers, or marketers, or anybody that's interested in working with our amazing group of artists to help collaborate with Root Studio to join us on our mission to help rural artists everywhere digitize to discover. Thank you. And I would like to now welcome to the stage Stacy from PYT, Pay Your Tuition.
Good afternoon. My name is Stacy Wissenot, CEO and founder of PYT Funds. Now, someone's thinking that PYT stands for Pretty Young Thing. However, I'm not that young. I think I'm pretty, though. And on a serious note, although this sounds very simple, paying your tuition is very hard for many American families. I was one of those American families. My mother was a single mother, and she basically said, Stacey, I don't know how we're going to pay your tuition. So I signed up for the military, served 8 years in the military, paid my tuition, now a U.S. veteran, went on to work for HSBC Bank, one of the world's largest banks, and then bought my first home at 23. 2 years later, my sister goes to the same school, and she said, I'm not going to the military. No way, no how, not doing it. Stacey can't make me. And so I said, you know what? You need a private student loan. However, my mother didn't have the credit that was needed, so we did what we had to do to find alternative means. And that's how I chose to pay my own tuition. And one reason why I started to become a crowdfunding site where students could come and raise money to try to pay their tuition and reduce their student loan debt. And then we came across a student by the name of Francina right here at Howard University who's 19 years old. She had just met her mother because she came from a foster care background, so at the age of 19, she had just met her mother and didn't have a cosigner. $120 billion a year goes into private student loans. 90% of those require a cosigner. We became Francina's cosigner. And so together on our platform, Francina came to us. She was able to raise money. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to raise the $5,000 that she needed, but she did raise $1,500. We took that cash that she raised, along with academic data, social data, professional data, and the fact that she was working a part-time job, packaged it together and went to our local bank and said, can we get Francina a loan? We're co-signing for her. And that's what we're doing here at PYT. We're helping students stay in school and graduate and get the degree that they deserve. So we partnered with Sally Mae, who's helped us to be able to originate some of these loans, but we're still finding that a lot of students are missing the bar because of a 700 FICO score. So we created our own nonprofit vehicle where we can take in as little as $1 to help students be able to pay their tuition with very small micro scholarships where we could have helped Francina ourselves. And so together, meaning me and you, we can be able to build this loan vehicle to help pay a student's tuition one loan at a time. Thank you. And now, welcome to the stage, my friends and fellows, Sam and Gator of Corvita.
Hi, I'm Gator Halpern. This is Sam Teicher, and we're the co-founders of Coralvita, a company that grows climate change resilient coral to restore our world's dying coral reefs. In just the past few decades, we've lost 30% of our world's coral reefs. And by mid-century, scientists predict that due to climate change and local impacts, 75% of our world's reefs will die. Now, this is not simply an ecological tragedy. It's also a serious socioeconomic problem, as reefs currently support over 500 million people around the world and generate over $30 billion through tourism, fishery production, and coastal protection.
At Coral Vita, we could preserve reef health through the scientifically proven process known as coral farming. We will grow corals in land-based farms and then transplant them into the ocean, helping revive reef health and the values that they provide. We're working with two of the world's foremost coral scientists that have developed breakthrough technologies that allow us to make corals stronger and grow them faster. We can now grow them 50 times faster, translating into months rather than decades, while enhancing their resiliency to the threats such as warming and acidifying ocean that threaten reef survival. Now, for me and Gator, and yes, that's really his name, this is personal for us given our lifelong love for the oceans. Before becoming friends at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, Gator worked on international development projects in Brazil, Peru, and South Africa, and I myself worked on climate adaptation policy at the White House after helping launch a UN-funded coral farm in Mauritius.
While Sam and I are driven by our passion for the oceans, reef restoration represents an enormous business opportunity that Coral Vita's for-profit model is able to take advantage of in ways that existing nonprofits simply can't. We're initially targeting the ecotourism industry, and we're actually about halfway through our seed funding round, which will allow us to build a small-scale farm in partnership with a leading resort in the Dominican Republic. From there, we plan to scale up to service larger customers like governments whose national interests depend on reef health, and international development banks who are promoting economic and environmental welfare. Ultimately, we envision a global network of Coral Vita nurseries that can sustain our coral reefs. If you or anyone you know is interested in helping us achieve this vision, or if you'd like to come down and help us plant a coral sometime, please let us know. Thanks.
And now please give a warm welcome to our friend Ashley from Market Opportunity.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashley King Bischoff, and I'm the founder and CEO of Market Opportunity, a for-profit social enterprise based in Kenya. Did you know that there are 500 million smallholder farmers around the world today, making only a few dollars a day? Well, it's true, and they face a lot of constraints that find it very difficult to get good pricing in their markets. They lack transportation, they lack market information, and they become these price takers. And spending time in East Africa for a few years, I learned that this is a really common theme across East Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and even the world. And that's why I created Market Opportunity. Market Opportunity simply does two things. It buys produce from smallholder farmers and then it distributes it to supermarkets or wholesale buyers in East Africa. We've developed a novel text messaging platform that allows farmers to communicate with us in real time that they are ready to sell. And then we use an Android app that we developed in order to digitize that trading information and enable an inventory system that allows us to tell farmers what they're trading with. And that's really novel. In fact, the 300 farmers that we're working with today, we've seen that we can improve their incomes up to 33% over their local market. In 2050, the global food production across the world needs to increase 70% to meet market demand. And up until today, smallholder farmers like those in Kenya and East Africa have been widely excluded from getting into those markets and getting good prices. And that's why Market Opportunity is going to expand across East Africa with our model. We're currently raising seed funding to do that. We've proven that it works in one small community, and we want to prove that it works and benefits most farmers in East Africa. So if you're interested in learning more, or you are passionate about food supply chains or passionate about smallholder farmers, come talk to me. I'm really interested to talk to you as well. And as a smallholder farmer would say in East Africa, asante sana. Thanks so much. And my fellow foodie, Nupsa Philip Vang with Foodini.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everyone. My name is Nupsa Philip Vang, and I'm the founder and CEO of Foodini. There are nearly 20 million immigrants in the United States today that have only a high school education or less and earn under $20,000 per year. The financial, educational, and language barriers that these communities face greatly limit their access to job opportunities. My mom, Joa Vang, is one of those individuals. She came to the U.S. from the country of Laos as a Hmong refugee after the Vietnam War. Upon arrival, the only jobs available to her were low paying, so she had to work multiple odd jobs to make ends meet. But still, she made time to cook us great home-cooked meals. At the time, it seemed impossible for her to earn a living wage using the best skill that she had, cooking Hmong food. And many immigrants I've spoken with share the same story, and all of them inspired me to create Foodini. Now, Foodini is a way for people just like my mom to use their skills in cooking authentic home-cooked cultural foods and sharing it and earning a living off of it, a living wage. As a for-profit social enterprise right here in DC, we provide a commercial kitchen for independent immigrant home chefs to come in and create their authentic meals. Through our e-commerce platform, the chefs are able to sell their meals directly to customers. On the Foodini website, you can order meals from multiple chefs and cultures and have it delivered to you at your chosen time. Now, as I speak, I'm sure we're all probably maybe getting a little hungry. I know I am. And some of you may already be planning what you're going to eat tonight for dinner. And I think that's because we all value a great meal. It's something we want to share with our friends and our family. Our Foodini home chefs share their cultures through their food, crafting each unique meal with love, just like how my mom does, still today. And we're so close to sharing that with all of you. So Foodini, we're going to be soft launching in October, and we invite all of you to take part. Our very first home chef, Chef Mam, is here today, and she's brought samples of her Lao dishes for all of you to try. So meet us outside, grab some food, and we'd love to tell you more about Foodini. Thank you, and enjoy. I'd like everybody to give a warm welcome to my brothers here, Bobby and Zay from SOAR.
Good afternoon, everybody. Phil, thank you very much for that introduction. My name is Eloise Teixeira.
And I'm Bobby Moore, and we're the co-founders of SOAR.
6 years ago, I joined the Big Brothers Big Sisters Association of Baltimore. And when I was introduced to my little, Ben, he was 16 years old with a baby on the way. He was motivated, and he was looking for work. So naturally, my first question to him was, let me see your resume. He didn't have one. So I said, okay, well, how about achievements at school? And while he had achievements that he had done, he had nothing to give me. He had been throwing away all of his schoolwork since he could remember. And nobody had told him that there was a value to the work that he was doing in the classroom or to think about anything outside of school. So what did we do? Well, we started from scratch, but ultimately, I had to advocate for him to get his first job. But before this conversation happened, when I was talking to him about the value of school, he stopped me and he said, hey, can I bring 5 of my friends so that they can hear the same thing? Because he recognized the value of the information that I was giving him. So I got to thinking, and I started doing some research, and I realized that while we have so many projects and programs that are targeted at inner cities and raising the graduation rates, we aren't focusing on what students are supposed to do after they graduate. We aren't preparing our kids for life outside of school in whatever shape that comes. And this isn't 500 students, this isn't 1,000 students. This is an epidemic, and that's why we need SOAR.
SOAR is changing the way school communities value student work from elementary school, middle school, high school, and beyond. I taught 4th and 5th grade in West Baltimore for 4 years through Teach for America, and I wish we had SOAR in our school community, not only because of the impact it would have provided our students, but because SOAR is shifting the mindset in how urban school communities are valuing student work. SOAR makes it easy for teachers to work with students to digitize their work from grade level to grade level. Once this work is digitized from grade level to grade level, this presents a whole new learning opportunity for both the teacher and the student. Students learn where they could improve, where they've made progress, but they can also take their best work, the work that matters most to them, and create an online digital portfolio. This online digital portfolio can be used for student-led conferences, but also to pursue opportunities outside of the four walls of a classroom. We launched a beta in Baltimore City, and we're currently working with over 1,000 students. As we continue to grow here through the Halcyon program, we're looking for introductions for any type of school leadership, but also local and regional foundations. We hope that you can join us on this journey. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce my friend, Carrie Ann, CEO of Open Data Nation.
Thank you. I don't know about you, but I am excited for that Laotian food later today. And I can assure you that while it is going to fill our tummies, it hopefully won't make us sick. We're not going to get a foodborne illness like E. coli or norovirus like if we went to Chipotle after today's festivities. And I'm certain of that I have a certain degree of certainty around that because my company, Open Data Nation, works with the cities and counties that do health inspections and other types of inspections to develop smart city solutions like FEVER, or Food Inspection Violations Anticipating Risk. It works like this. We take data from restaurant inspections, process it through an algorithm, and use some data science techniques to predict which restaurants are going to fail their inspections, and then put that information in the hands of inspectors to go to the riskiest locations first and keep us all safe, both effectively and efficiently, from foodborne illness outbreaks. FEVER is currently being piloted in a few U.S. cities and counties to the tune of about $2 million in cost savings in the first year alone. And with our algorithm, we can identify up to 49% more violations 12 days sooner on average. Whoa. My name is Carrie Ann Nadeau. My company is Open Data Nation. I founded it while a graduate student at MIT and based on my experience as a data scientist at the Brookings Institution and Urban Institute. Over my time here at Halcyon, we'll continue to build relationships with city and county governments, and we're looking for your support to sell our product, or our data that we develop as a byproduct from our consultation to city and county governments, to insurance agencies who are better looking to understand the risks that are lurking in the restaurants that they insure. Thank you very much. And without further ado, the last presentation between you and the food, I think, is Phil and David of Storytime.
Hi all, I'm Phil, that is David, and we are Storytime. We send illustrated stories by text message to low-income families that don't have books. But I started teaching preschool at Martinez Head Start. When my class's parents didn't have books at home, they were struggling just to afford diapers and work 80-hour weeks. The result is that low-income 3-year-olds hear 30 million fewer words than wealthier kids. That stunts early brain growth, and it sets them up to fail before they even start preschool. But every parent at Martinez did have a phone, so David and I built Storytime to send books by text and make it easier for families to actually get reading. And David has more to say on that.
Thanks, Phil. Now, early literacy is a $9 billion market in Head Start preschools alone, and school districts spend billions each year just trying to catch their kids up to meet reading standards. Now, we do that a lot cheaper. Storytime is literally 1,000 times less expensive than just shipping paperbacks. It increases nightly reading by 160% for our families, and Stanford researchers have already proven our literacy impact. Now, last summer, we piloted with the school districts of New Haven and Hartford, and we're currently working with districts that include Martin County and Palm Beach County of Florida, a total of 5,000 families. But there's over 50% of U.S. toddlers who aren't enrolled in any preschool. We're working to get their families reading, and to help them get ready for school.
So David and I are both technical founders funded by Google.org. David is my best friend from Yale, where we both studied computer science. So I'm sorry if we're a little socially awkward. David is our CTO, and he actually quit Google to start Storytime. So I know he's a good friend. And I'm Phil, CEO. I've researched social policy at Harvard, Yale, and Columbia, and taught preschool. The two of us are new to DC, so please come say hi. And if you know any early grade teachers, principals, charter leaders, we'd love to hear their advice. We're also raising a $400,000 seed round in summer of next year. Our goal is to reach the families like the parents I met at Martinez who are overwhelmed but keep going on for their kids. It is only a few minutes a night, but is a few minutes they can quit worrying about everything else and just be together. Now, we're using the tech that every parent has to close the word gap at scale. Again, we are Storytime, and thank you for listening.
All right, so that's cohort 5. Give them another round of applause. It's really incredible. We, I keep expecting at some point in time we're going to get a cohort where it's like, oh, they're not so impressive. But the talent out there is unbelievable because the problems and the solutions out there, are really pressing. And the talent that's working on this is incredible. So I highly encourage you after this to get to know and meet some of these social entrepreneurs. I'm Ryan Ross, the program director for the Halcyon Incubator. I recognize that I probably don't know everyone in the room yet, so if I haven't met you yet, please come talk to me afterwards. We've got an incredible panel coming up, and it's really going to segue the conversation from looking at, kind of the ground level of each individual entrepreneur that we're working with here to the ecosystem level, and how are we looking at and building social enterprise ecosystems. And then we're going to get to the Lao food, so we're working our way there. Just stick with us. So I have some shameless plugs that I want to do first. Okay, so the first is, how do we find incredible entrepreneurs? It's because of people like yourselves. Our application process is open now. So if you are or know incredible social entrepreneurs, please send them to us. They can go to our website, halcyonincubator.org, to learn more and to apply directly online. And if you need any more information or outreach materials, just let us know. It really is kind of through the power of our networks that we're able to find great social entrepreneurs to support here at Halcyon. Okay, so social enterprise ecosystems. It's the type of thing that gets you up in the morning, right? You say it when you wake up and then you're energized. It's like a jolt of caffeine. So in all seriousness, this topic is a really important one, though, especially here in DC, right? How does this interconnected web of funders and partners and other supporters actually work together to catalyze the social entrepreneurs that are doing the work on the ground and really benefiting the community? So along with our partner, Capital One, an incredible group of thought leaders in the social enterprise field, we embarked on a survey to actually talk to social entrepreneurs and find out what makes a great ecosystem for them, and then to measure ecosystems across the country and see how they're doing. You may be a little bit familiar with this because we literally put one on everyone's seat when you came in, so you have the report in your hands. And so I encourage you to take a look when you have a chance. But we're going to go a little bit beyond that. I'll go ahead and give you the quick summary. There's 4 big pillars of a social enterprise ecosystem: funding, human capital, regulation and receptivity, and quality of life. And these 4 pillars were identified by the social entrepreneurs in our survey, and then we had some of the partners actually write a little bit about them in the report. And we are so lucky to have those people here today to speak with us a little bit more about the ecosystem report and what it means. But before we get there, you're probably wondering, how did you get busy social entrepreneurs to respond to the survey? Well, we bribed them. And no social entrepreneur can resist the allure of potentially getting $200 less in their debt. To actually capitalize on the promise that we made, we're very fortunate to be joined by Clay Sipple, who's the city lead here in Washington, D.C. for WeWork, who sponsored the prize to do the drawing to see who's going to be $200 less in the hole as a social entrepreneur. So I'm very happy to welcome Clay to the stage.
Thank you, Ryan. Every dollar counts. Should I go ahead and we'll just hold the suspense real quick. I'm sure many of you have heard of WeWork. One of the aspects of our mission is to help people create their life's work. And I've met thousands of people, over 80 WeWorks all around the world, and I can tell you the life's work you all are creating here is absolutely mind-blowing, and I hope one day we get to be privileged enough to host your companies in our workspace. We are Workspace, but we're a lot more than that, and I'd love for you to find me afterwards to discuss that. We have 120 locations around the world. We have a network beyond what many people can offer, and we love taking people who are truly changing the world and letting them use our space and our services and everything else. So I'd love to speak with you more and meet you if I haven't already. And the lucky person from Dallas, so I don't think we're going to hear her hoops and hollers today, is Ashley Van Burskik. So congratulations to her.
All right, Ashley, if you're out there, congratulations. Another shameless plug. If you're a social entrepreneur and you want to be $200 in the hole less for next year, you can sign up on our website, because we're going to do this survey again to measure year over year how social enterprise ecosystems are doing. So if you're interested in this, if you're interested in having your voice heard, go to socenTcity.org. That's SOCENT city.org, and you can actually put your email in right there, and we'll make sure to contact you when the survey's out. And now we have an incredible panel of experts to talk about this and to really give us how does this connect to me in my life as a social entrepreneur or investor or wannabe investor, as I think we validated earlier. All of the people on this panel today are really close to us at Halcyon. I'm going to give some brief intros, and then we'll do the panel, and then we'll have some cupcakes, coffee, and Lao food. So first, the moderator today is Frank LaPrade. There's Frank. There's Frank. Hey. So Frank serves as the Chief Enterprise Services Officer for Capital One and the Chief of Staff to the CEO. So every time that I get my 10th Uber ride free on the Quicksilver Capital One card, I thank Frank. He didn't write that. That was all me. Frank I just want to say, Frank and Capital One, the reason we're doing this work is because of Capital One. So I just want to give a huge thank you to Capital One for all their support. And then we have an incredible panel that's coming up as well. They all happen to be in our advisory committee. So if you're ever like, wow, these fellows are really talented, it's because they selected them. And if you find any duds in the fellows, blame them, not us. It was all them. So first, Sonal Shah. Sonal's the Executive Director of the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University. So her incredible career in the social impact world has spanned the public, private, nonprofit, and academic sectors. And somehow we conned her into actually working with us at Halcyon, which is incredible. So we're very excited about that. Bill Eggers is the Executive Director of Deloitte's Center for Government Insights, one of our core partners in supporting the fellows, and he also is the author, another shameless plug here, of a new book out, Delivering on Digital, the Innovators and Technologies that are Transforming Government. So after you wake up in the morning and say social enterprise ecosystems, then you can read the book about how digital innovators are transforming government. And so we're very excited about that. That was a joke. We can laugh at the joke. It's actually, it's incredible. Bill's incredible. I kid, but I'm going to read the book. And last, but certainly not least, Sheila Herling, who is the Senior Vice President for Social Innovation at the Case Foundation. Sheila truly lives on the cutting edge of how we are investing in impact. And a lot of people talk the talk, but Sheila and Case as a whole, they're walking the walk. So feel free to bombard her with requests for advice and everything. She's really brilliant at that. So as you can tell, we're in for an incredible panel. So without further ado, please welcome all of these brilliant individuals to our stage.
I promise we didn't pay him to say that, but you do get the 10th ride, you know. Discounted. Dr. Kuno and Kate, and thanks for having Capital One be a part of the study, and thanks for having me here. I am blown away by the talent you bring in. And to all the fellows who are running the program, especially Gator. I'm going to change my name to Gator. Go change the world. We have an incredible panel here. I'm just going to go by Gator, no last name anymore. That's it. We have an incredible panel here today who has really spent an extraordinary amount of time thinking about the social ecosystem. And really were instrumental in developing the survey that we got a lot of data from. And so I thought we'd start today, with a real general question that I know all three of you have thought a lot about. And then we can drill down into some of the pillars that were mentioned. But generally, why is this ecosystem so important? We think of entrepreneurs being like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in a garage, and they work 100 hours a day, and then they come out with their computer. But really, there's this community of people and a lot of elements that have to come together to make it work. So, Sonal, why don't we start with you, and we'll go ask each of you just your general impressions, any takeaways from the report, any surprises or advice?
Thank you, Frank. Really appreciate it, and it's great that you all sponsored the report. Actually, it's valuable for the community in general to have access to information on what's missing and what is needed. So, thank you for taking the leadership on that. I'd also like to thank the Halcyon House, Sachiko Kuno, Kate, and Ryan for just putting together this incredible. I think even just 3 years ago when you were talking about putting together Halcyon Incubator into where we are today and just seeing the caliber of the fellows, it's incredible. Ecosystems matter in the same way for the reason it matters in Silicon Valley. It's not that just an entrepreneur has access to a great idea and gets access to finance and then they get mentorship. It's that there is a group of people around that help create that system. And you get access to finance, but you get mentorship. And that's actually one of the most important parts of, I think, what Halcyon also offers is the mentorship aspect. And that there's a group of people in the community that want to help them succeed. Right. So that ecosystem and those ecosystems matter. And the fact that we can create that and hopefully do that more in DC, because we're seated where the federal government is, but there's a lot of international governments that come here and see what it takes to build an ecosystem, and then allow that to happen in every city across the world. And it doesn't have to be just in DC, but if every city across the world had these ecosystems to support social entrepreneurs who want to change the world will actually change. And that's what matters.
Great. Bill?
Do I need that? No. So Ryan mentioned the most recent book I wrote, but I wrote another one that came out a couple years ago called The Solution Revolution, which actually looked at these ecosystems of social enterprises, private companies, governments, entrepreneurs, and others who are working together to solve our biggest problems. So we've undergone a complete transformation in how we solve big, wicked, tough societal problems. And that was 20 years ago, there was government and there was nonprofits, and most of whom were pretty small. Foundations, somewhat at the local level, but not in a big way. And now those organizations have a lot of help. There's over 2.3 million social enterprises around the world, growing by tens of thousands every week, literally. All the kind of individuals that we saw today, these are some of the best and brightest from business schools, from technology. 20 years ago would have gone into business, right? And maybe now they're going into solving these problems. So we've dramatically increased the talent that's going into solving these sort of problems. And we now have funding with it. There's literally billions of dollars going into impact investing. We have all sorts of other structures that have happened. And this is all within really the last decade or so, thanks to people like Sonal and others, and Sheila, who have been helping bring those people together and funding them, and the SNR. So that's the sea change that's occurred. And for governments, it's about the governments that are doing best right now, the ones that really understand how to utilize all that and how to pull all these players together in a way to help, really address some of their really tough challenges. And I think right now the cities are probably doing the best job of that. They have a lot of the infrastructure available. There's a lot of really, really tough issues we're still faced with here, but I think the promise is really incredible from where we are now to where we were just a decade ago in this respect.
So I hate it when you're on panels and all the panelists agree, and now I'm going to be the one who agrees. So look, I would say that I often think of the importance of ecosystems being, entrepreneurs always thinking, well, I've got to keep my head down, right? Focus, I got to build this thing. And that it gets focused on the invention of a product, right? And the difference with the ecosystem mentality is that it's a focus on innovation, not invention. And innovation happens in the collaborative space where you have emerging, as we've already said, of the financial capital ideas, of the social capital ideas, and it really happens magically when there is intentional diversity in those ideas. Because one thing you wouldn't suspect is related to yours actually becomes the tipping point for one of the greatest innovations and evolutions that you make in your companies. And so what I love really about having served on the Halstein Advisory Board is seeing that intentionality play out quite purposefully in the selection of the fellows. You don't want too many people working in the same sector. You want gender diversity and age diversity, inspirational diversity. And that, I think, is really just where the ecosystems thrive.
We'll find the anti-innovation. If there's an anti-innovation panelist that wants to come up, since we all agree, let me know. The report, so we are all from the DC area. We did the study of major cities, and DC came out number 1 in the survey. I promise you it was not biased whatsoever. But anybody surprised by that? I mean, I think DC, we'll get into some of the pillars that we talked about. DC is a bit of a hidden gem in a way from an innovation. I think the tech community here, known for a lot of things. Anybody surprised? I think if you thought of innovation, you would think of San Francisco. Anybody here surprised that DC was number 1?
First of all, yay! But yeah, I was a little bit surprised. I think we know enough because we live here that we know that hidden gem, and so it's nice to have that out in the public right now. I was a little surprised on if you think about density. Right. So what's the probability that you walk out your door and run into another entrepreneur? In DC, I would have put that at a not good probability.
Right.
Right. And that is usually how I think about really robust ecosystems for entrepreneurship. And so the question I have is, well, what's interesting about putting the social entrepreneurship ahead of that? And is there something that is unique in DC? And there, I think you've heard some of that. I mean, DC is our nation's capital. You're sitting at national policy level. You're also sitting in a hub of a lot of international organizations working at social change. And so there is a secret sauce there. But I admit to being
I
happy
think
and
that's
surprised.
a great point. DC is so known for attracting from all over the world incredibly smart people who want to solve big problems. I think typically we think of that more in the policy realm, maybe the government realm or other. But this whole avenue, it really is symbiotic with that. Bill, you may have special insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's interesting is studying so deeply, these areas in other cities. I was interested in some of it. I will say, I lived in Austin for 8 years, and saying that Austin had a good transportation system, that is absolutely not the case, right? It's just very, very congested. So, but I think the interesting thing was look at San Francisco. So San Francisco came out at the bottom of the list in terms of how people perceive government in terms of the ecosystems, right? And DC very high. And some of that was because of, I think, perceived regulatory barriers in San Francisco. But and that's what shows that they have to work on that piece. But San Francisco actually has something called the Entrepreneurs in Residence program. And it was really the first of its kind. And what it does is it does something similar to Halcyon House, where they will they created an incubator, and startups, social startups and regular for-profit startups will come in, and they'll get to actually work with the departments to basically develop MVP, minimum viable products that they work within there, and then they can then take to the market. It's I would say that it's pretty innovative. They're going through their second round now. They're learning lots of things, and it's become within the innovation community fairly well known, but you saw that they were still ranked so low because some of the basics they probably still weren't getting right. So I think you have to get some of those basics right. But I think DC got so high in that respect just because you have the federal government too, and so many of the federal agencies have programs that are basically between prizes and challenges, the social innovation units and everything that will welcome them in.
So I'm going to come back to you with a question about funding, but I have a little precursor question, Sheila, for you. So let me read you some data from the study. You may not wake up every day thinking about ecosystems, but how many of you that are entrepreneurs here wake up every day thinking about funding? Right, that's what I thought. So funding was one of the 4 pillars, and I want to drill into that a little bit. Of all the respondents, people that had been in social enterprise for less than a year, 53%, roughly half, thought that local investors understood social enterprise. People that had been in it 5 years or more, only 39% thought people understood social enterprise, social innovation, social impact. You know, Sheila, you deal with this all the time, but it occurred to me, there's a real question, and there may be some division about this. Do people really get what social investing is, what social impact, social entrepreneurship is when they think about making an investment? And how do you think about it? What's, you know, in a typical investment, I would think about the risk-adjusted rate of return or, you know, things like that in a fully commercial business. In this, you may have different intent about how you measure outcomes. How do you measure success? How do you think about that?
Well, in response to your first broader question, I mean, my sense is there's been a lot of momentum in the space. Certainly over the last couple of years, you're actually seeing financial products emerge. So I think that there is a growing momentum in the space, but mostly confusion and mostly suspicion, right? So if you're talking about pure people who are looking for financial returns, they will almost always be skeptical about this social impact investment, thinking that that is a forced trade-off between a financial return.
Meaning
and
I could lose money or do good.
That's right. And so like, oh, well, if I'm willing to lose some of my financial return for being a do-gooder, that's somebody else. You want to talk to somebody else. Right. So what we've really been trying to promote is we're not asking you to make a trade-off. Like, we're not. Some of these companies that are coming right now, like any entrepreneur, they have a problem they're trying to solve, and they're going about it just like an entrepreneur who's developing an app, more or less. But their problem is huge, and it happens to be social. But it does not mean sacrificing a financial return. There is a long way to go on educating in the process, and there's a long way to go, and Bill can speak to this great, on the data side of it. We all know what the standards are for financial measurement, for financial returns. The social returns part of it is an evolving practice, and we need to head towards standards.
Can I just add to that? Because I think in economics, you call this an externality.
Right.
So when you're doing risk-adjusted returns and other things, we don't actually look at the externalities. We count that after the fact. So if something happens, then we spend the extra money beyond that to fix the problem. But all we're asking now is to make the externalities a part of the actual equation.
Yeah.
So solve for the problem and then also make a financial return, but don't cheapen out the other stuff that happens in the process, whether it's the way our waterways are polluted in certain cities, or whether it's, you know, what happens in the soil, lead soil, and some of the, you know, what you're hearing about in different places. Like, we're just saying, I think social impact is when you're saying the externalities are part of the real aspect of running a business today. And I think I would just argue that even corporations are having to deal with their externalities now. And so how do you make that a part of your risk equation?
I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to ask you that. So when you think about this term social impact, you have a lot of companies purporting to being purpose-driven companies. And I believe them. I don't mean that in a disparaging way. You know, they want to solve aging. You want driverless cars. We want to launch rockets privately. There's, you know, they want to solve big problems. These social impact entrepreneurs want to solve equally big problems. Do those things start to blur a bit? Is there a language issue? Or Sona, why don't you comment, and then Bill, I'd love to hear your comment.
They do start blurring, and I hope they do, actually, because over time you'll be collecting data. I think the question we should be asking people in the same way we do with financial metrics is ask people to report on the impact that they're having. And I think Case Foundation's actually got a great report out on, rather than trying to define all the metrics up front, if you're saying you're measuring against X impact, then report on that.
Right.
And make that public, so eventually the markets will start figuring out which impact they want to fund and which ones they don't want to fund. But don't claim impact after the fact and then say, see, we had all this impact and we created all these jobs. I don't think jobs is a good enough impact.
Right.
Like, it's great comment, but then what's the difference between just creating a job with any company and creating a job with a social entrepreneur? It's the same. That's not a good enough answer. But I do think if you say you're having an impact, whether it's in ecosystems, whether it's in helping farmers, whether it's helping students get access to loans, all of those should just be measured and reported, and then let's let the market figure out the data piece of that.
But there's an intentionality up front, right, that you're saying, I will be tracking this. This is part of my core business model.
Right. Right. Bill, you look like you were chomping at the bit.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, when we look at the fellows, you know, and all the different cohorts, we actually can see through the fellows how the blurring of the line, half of the fellows end up being for-profit, some of them thinking of B Corp, nonprofit, and this and that looking at that blurring. So I got to spend time yesterday with Beth Comstock, who's the vice chairman of GE, and she was actually the person that spearheaded their eco-imagination and healthy imagination funds, where they put in billions of dollars, basically, into, in terms of healthcare, trying to basically come up with cures for cancer, and on the environment side, environmental solutions. Now, they've had a huge impact in that, but those are for-profit endeavors because they actually view that there's a market in solving those problems. I loved you guys at Coral Vita because that's what you're saying. You're saying, we're going to solve these problems, but there's a huge market. I mean, this is like country's survival in some cases. Right. And so I think that's that sweet spot that we're starting to see, and we're starting to see among social entrepreneurs. Let me just give you one statistic that's amazing. I'm going to butcher it a little bit because this study was done by my colleague Nate Wong, who's been the leader behind a lot of our stuff here at Halcyon House. And we had 70 Deloitte consultants look at all sorts of different measures of financial performance and from companies over time, Fortune 500. And we then bucketed them into basically 4 different groups, all the way from those who are just concerned with shareholder impact versus those who are foremost concerned with social innovation, right? And so it was, pretty small. I think shareholder impact was what, Nate, 10% around there? Social innovation, maybe 4 or 5%. Now, 20 years ago, it would have been 95% shareholder impact. Most of them were in the middle and moving towards that. And then another piece of work that Nate led looked at, okay, now we're going to look at, it was the Fortune, the Fast Company, the Fastco 50 top companies, right? These are like the fastest growing companies right now, and it's remarkable. It turned out that 40% of them started out with basically all about having a social impact. We call them born socials, essentially. Think about that. That is all you guys. You're trying to solve problems, but they're growing faster than all these other companies because there's actually a market now. People finally realize in solving these big, hairy problems. So there's a total blurring of the lines going on.
I'm going to ask quickly one more thing about funding because everybody who's here, and I hope you all end up staying in DC, it's a great city. We rank #1, but the place we fell off, we were almost at the bottom of the list, was in access to funding. So while it may be improving, I kind of want to stare at what does that mean for our ecosystem. I can tell you my own, Capital One, in my own groups, I recruit thousands of engineers, data scientists, designers to this market. And have offices in many of these other competing markets. So I could see the recruiting part firsthand. The biggest thing that I hear is people love DC, but without more, it's kind of a chicken or egg. Without more VC type funding and more startups, it's like, well, hey, I like your thing, but what if I want to go do something else? Like, have we reached that critical mass of sustainability? How do you solve the chicken or egg if there is a chicken or egg kind of a problem in funding? But that seems to me, if you want to get the 4 legs of the stool we're going to talk about, the other 3, read the report, really high. This one we were towards the bottom, San Francisco. And just to give you the data, DC Ventures, we were ranked next to last on this survey. DC Ventures raised 29%, 0 to 50,000. In less, 12.5% raised 100 to 249,000. San Francisco, we're raising 100,000 to $1 million. So we've all looked at this. Anybody comment? But Sheila, I'll start with you since you were talking about the improvement. How do we get there from here?
I wish I knew the answer. Then
and you have 2 minutes.
Look, I think DC is funny in that way, right? Because it's not as if there isn't venture capital here, but it often doesn't go to investing in entrepreneurs in this city.
Right.
And it's not as if there aren't high net worth individuals here.
A lot of, yeah.
But for some reason, it's not the same mentality as Austin, as San Francisco, as New York, as Boston, where you've had high growth companies and you've had spin-offs from those companies and money staying there and reinvesting into the entrepreneurial ecosystems of those cities. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do think that it's not surprising to me that we didn't score as highly there. I think it'll come on, right? I do think it'll come on stronger as we have more successes incubating in this city. We have some great incubators. We've got 1776, we have Halcyon, we have Vilcap. So I think you are going to see some more entrepreneurs emerging in the city, and if the survey is right, it's going to attract more. I think the next question is going to be, can we keep them, right? Because if they leave the city, this, I just feel like the finance is going to keep flowing to other cities.
Yep. Sonal, and let's switch to, the second pillar that we were talking about is, and it may relate to quality of life, but it was really human capital. So I think if you looked at the talent on display that came up on the stage, this is awe-inspiring. These are like the leading candidates that any leading company, people are quitting Google to come found companies. Amazing. Any comment on, and you get to see deeply into a university setting as well, how do we win this kind of talent battle to bring talent in? How do we make sure we get inclusive? Some of the data in here showed it was a little harder for women and people of color to get access to funding or access to mentors. Any thoughts? And anybody can weigh in, but I'll start with you, Sonal, about kind of the talent model that we need for this ecosystem.
I don't think the city has a problem attracting talent, because I think for many reasons, DC is a great place to come to. I think we have to think about I would add a couple of more things to Sheila's point. It's expensive to live in the city.
Right.
And entrepreneurs go to Austin because it's not that expensive. You can rent a place for $1,500 a month. Here, for $1,500 a month, you'd be lucky to find a place. But thinking about kind of there are very few places that actually have housing as a part of the incubation. So attracting the talent is not hard. There's lots of great young people that come to the city because they either care about the international, they care about the social. The city attracts that crowd. And frankly, I think the universities are doing a great job of making people think about how do you solve the world's problems. And they are coming because they think they can come do that, and they're looking for new ways of doing it. I think the challenge for us is trying to figure out how to retain them and keep them. I think to Sheila's point of once they build their incubator, they incubate their business, if the capital isn't here, they're going to go where the capital is, and they're going to move the business to where they can afford to do it. And that, I think, we have to think about how do we retain the talent, not just attract the talent, but it's attracting it and retaining it. And I think that's our biggest challenge that we have. I don't think we have a problem with the talent. I mean, look at this crowd, and then everybody that applied to the Halcyon Incubator. It's incredible. They're coming from all over the world. How do we keep them here? I would love to figure out a way for us as a community to think about what is it going to take to keep this talent in DC and continuing to build these businesses, whether it's getting the right connections to contracts, whether it is finding space so they can incubate themselves, or whether it's getting them the capital so they can actually grow and survive in their business.
It's a great point. I'd love the two of you to comment on, this. DC is a destination for some of the most talented people in the world who want to solve big problems. So I totally agree with you there, but there's kind of this runway. If you get initial funding, you can go get your thing off the ground, but then if you don't fill the void, almost inevitably these entrepreneurs have to go somewhere else. Any thoughts on how do we start to extend that runway and make sure that we keep people here? And that'll start creating some of the flywheel, because people will see success, they'll want to come here, more investment will come here, and so on. Any thoughts?
I'll just say a few things. I think what we've seen in other cities, certainly the business community could play a much more active role. One of the real kind of godfathers of social innovation, social entrepreneurship is across the way, Bill Drayton from Ashoka, and always talk about what he calls them hybrid value chains. And his view has always been that actually it's that combination of larger companies working with social entrepreneurs to help them to scale and going together, that is going to be one of the key things to solving a lot of these problems. And I think if you look at some of these other cities that have long time kind of business communities that are very involved in civic affairs and so forth, I was at Columbus and with the Columbus Business Partnership, or you see that in Chicago, you see that in other cities, that the business community could play a much bigger role in looking at these entrepreneurs, and also how do we do business with them? How can they become part of our supply chain and so forth? I don't think enough of that happens here. There's also government has a big role to play, and Sonal mentioned whether in procurement, where they're trying to start to create more procurement vehicles for social entrepreneurs, making it so it's not as difficult. But again, there's also a lot of contractors here, and how can they become part of that supply chain? We have something similar in the UK, which is called Deloitte Social Pioneers, where we basically provide pro bono assistance to about 15 or so social enterprises each year. And ultimately, what we found with a number of them, they were so good and so important that we started actually contracting with them.
Right.
For one of the organizations is just a wonderful organization. And basically, we not only contracted with them, but we then started actually recommending them to a lot of our clients and doing that sort of thing. So I think that's how you start to build that momentum up a little bit. And government needs to continue to open these up. And I think the city could do more in that respect.
Right. Sheila, any thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. We went to Africa last year with the Case Foundation. It was really a learning and exploration tour on entrepreneurial ecosystems there. And, are they different? They're not different. Really, they're the same struggles of entrepreneurs everywhere. The one thing that I thought was interesting about Africa was these funding syndicates that were coming around, which is, instead of spreading, particularly angel funding, around, right? So, okay, I'll give you $1 million. I've got $1 million to disperse each year, and you've got $1 million, and you've got $2 million, and you've got $5 million. What if we pooled it all and actually made some pretty deep investments and functioned, well, this much more like a venture fund, right? So not only do you get our pooled money, but you get our talent. And I thought that was super interesting, and I thought, that could happen in DC easily as well. There are a bunch of angel funders. They're just spread around, right, and doing their own thing.
Right.
And so it's much like, advice to the entrepreneurs. Share your ideas, people. Share your approaches. Share what's working. Share what's not. I think it happens more naturally at Halcyon because you're all living together. It doesn't happen as naturally elsewhere because people think that someone else is going to steal their idea. Well, if they steal your idea and deliver it faster, then you were never going to do it, or you would have been outbeaten at some point.
Right.
So, this notion of sharing and kind of opening up the space, I think there's potential there in the city.
Those are really good ideas. This aggregation of capital notion is one we got to all talk about. We've all worked in both the philanthropic side here and then also with, how do we stimulate some of this and accelerate some of this growth. And you do get into this kind of, you fragment.
Yep.
Yes. Some of these investments. Look, I know we want to do Q&A and we're getting short on time. One, let's hear it for the panel. I mean, this is amazing. Before we go to Q&A, and I know there's probably a billion things on your mind, but any last closing thoughts by anything I didn't ask that you wanted to say while we were in front of this audience?
I just would say one last thing to all of the fellows and the alumni and there, we looked at dozens of what we call solution ecosystems around problem-solving ecosystems or big problems. We found that there's a certain characteristics of them all, and they were, there's a variety of players. There's an integrator, there's an innovation engine, there's a portfolio of interventions, there is market sustainability. But to really look at those and say, what is your role in those? I heard from some of the fellows, I think your role is like the innovation engine. Some of them, you're actually playing a role where you've got one of the interventions towards a solution. It may be you want to be the integrator, bringing together all of these other organizations, the colliders of organizations and people, not just atoms, and really thinking that through, I think, is a really important element, because if you're a key part of that ecosystem, I think then the funding will come.
I would also just say, look, this is a long game. You all know this. Get very used to, and in fact, embrace being told, no, you're crazy. It'll never work. And embrace every one of those as an important lesson to learn on actually how you are going to make it and how you are going to improve your model. And then the one piece of advice that I really have learned is everybody focuses on the money, right? How do I get the money? It's all about the funding. I got to be out on the road getting funding. For me, it is advice to have a sort of mental check and a mind frame around recruiting advisors, not investors. And those advisors don't go after the CEO of the company, like every single time. Look at the expertise in the organizations you need and go at them. And those relationships ripple out in ways that are, in the long run, going to help you get the funding. It doesn't happen on day one, almost ever. And so that is just the thing that I really have seen played out that hopefully is helpful for you guys.
I'm not going to add any more advice to the fellows, but what I'm going to say is I think the reason these reports are very valuable is that we actually look at it and do something about it. So I think for the community of who we are in DC, let's look at this report of the ecosystem and let's do something about changing the indicators and trying to improve on the indicators, not just being happy that the report came out, but that we can actually improve our portion of that. And that's why these reports become more valuable over time. So I think we should take this report, look at it as a city, think about how to increase our rankings in the different portions of it, not just that we rank number one, but the fact that we can continue to stay and continue to, make it better for everybody else to do the same thing.
That's a great point, and we'll be, drilling down on this survey as we go forward, so participate. And just one closing thought. One, if you create a new ecosystem here, please don't use the word pivot or unicorn. Let's start a new language. The other thing I will say is just for all the entrepreneurs here, I work at a company that is founder-led and founder-driven, and got to watch it firsthand go from a blank sheet of paper to actually a thriving company, and it can be done. It's not that you'll hit plenty of bumps in the roads, and you'll hit walls, and you'll have experiences you think, is this really going to work? But having watched it firsthand, you can really do anything you put your mind to, and I really believe that. So with that, we're going to go to Q&A.
Two things came to my mind, and I was the sharing of ideas, which in the science community is very, very competitive and really frightening that, it really is, discoveries are a collaborative event, of course, and yet only a few people can get credit or something when you go for the Nobel or such. But it's this thing of the egoic competitiveness that I think, is harms the ability to advance society or humanity for me. And I think I'm losing my idea about, this report. Are you disseminating this now here in the district to our companies that are here so that they become awareness, or can the Washington Post cover it or something, or blog it or something?
It is being broadly disseminated, and anyone can cover it, and I hope they will.
My name's Connie Carter. I'm a lifetime Washingtonian, although I've lived all over the world. And when you all were talking, all I could think about was housing, that, if we can find affordable housing. And the one thing I'm struck by is when I was younger in New York, I always wanted to buy a dump, and fix it up and create sweat equity. But there's something about your generation that doesn't want to do fix-ups. And I know even when I tell my children, let's go buy, this wreck of an apartment, that's not something everyone's thinking of. So I just encourage anybody who wants to go shopping for dumpy property. I think trying to find, the other point I wanted to make is Washingtonians are stingy. I know living here, it's interesting that Washingtonians keep prices of higher end properties down, and yet entry-level properties are very expensive for people to move here. So we've got to figure out a way to change that disconnect.
Sounds like a business to me. It sounds like something in the works. Someone start that.
I will just say, getting to do with many millennials, it's totally a maker culture. They may not be making houses, but when I said to my wife, can we hire a kid to mow the lawn? They're like, they go to space camp, they don't mow lawns, and it doesn't work that way anymore. So they're making a lot of great things. I think they're working on big ideas. Anyone else?
I just want to go back to that comment you earlier made. Look, for all of you, the challenge is we're trying to work in a collaborative environment, and collaboration is really hard to do because the government as it's set up is siloed, and you're trying to find solutions that are non-siloed. And that is going to be a challenge. It is why I think Sheila's point about making sure you find not just mentors, but people who become your advocates is really important, because they're going to have to help you break those silos. And we don't know how to operate in non-siloed ways, but in order to solve any of our problems, we're going to have to operate in non-siloed ways. It's how we fund. We fund by sector. We don't fund across sectors. So are you healthcare or are you education? But if you're trying to go across those, we don't actually know what to do with it. Technology is about the only place where you could say technology and everybody agrees with it, even though it could be a horizontal and not a vertical. But think about how people can help you do that, because that's going to be the challenge, is making sure the systems that don't allow for collaboration allow you to collaborate.
So this is Sam from Coral Vita. So first, thanks for choosing us and all of these awesome people that we're with.
And it was a really, really tough cohort to pick from. Seriously, Ryan's right. Like every year we keep thinking, this is gonna be easy this time. And it's like, it's just really, every single one is always a tough act to follow.
So I was sort of thinking about how, along the lines of a lot of what you've been talking about, obviously everyone is looking for funding, but sort of in my experience, it's also been great to be able to just ask people, who do you know that I should be talking to? And sort of using that as, can I have a conversation with you? And to see who knows who or what, who knows what. And so I'm curious, in that sense of the ecosystem, just being able to help social entrepreneurs. Obviously we have Google, which is a blessing, especially for our generation, to be able to just look for anyone, but I think helping create that space would be very beneficial to just know who are the people that want to help social entrepreneurs, which Halcyon and others are helping do. But I guess the question I would have, to come back to funding for a second, is to your sort of chicken and egg point. Often there's a lot of angel investors, and impact investing I think is something like doubling every year, but there's not really impact angels, or at least not really well known. So is that a trend you see that's changing, that people who want to help the early stage, who haven't proven that they can generate even a little bit of a return or revenue, but have an idea for impact, but need that first, bit of investment to help them start trying it out? Do you see that changing at all, or what needs to happen to change it?
I'll just send a quick thing about that, and then Sheila and Son will probably know more. But there are in most cities, you've probably heard of social venture partners, which is basically a group of investors and so forth. And typically they had mostly been putting their money into traditional nonprofits over time, but they've been really shifting to, I would call it more of this, let's call it angel social impact investing. And then in a number of cities like Austin, where my friend created this thing called Mission Capital around it, which is trying to create basically that body where they could all pool their money into and play that role of kind of an integrator of a lot of the funds. And so I think it's beginning to happen. Certainly that's one group that's an interesting group for you to probably look at overall.
I think that's right. I mean, I guess my hope is that at some point it's not an impact angel and an angel. It's just an angel, and it's just that the vast majority of companies and investments happen to be solving a social problem.
Right.
And I think that will happen, but there's terminology issues right now. Yes, I think that there is angel funding and that it's going towards social impact companies for sure. And I agree that there are increasingly organizations that were primarily funding nonprofits that are, first of all, being much more demanding on the nonprofits they fund, that you don't get a buy for being not sustainable. Like, show me your sustainability plan. This is a business proposition. It's just a tax ID, whether you're nonprofit or for-profit. But that are also figuring out how to use their resources from the foundations. You can use your resources. It's just harder, right, to do PRIs, to invest in for-profits. So I think that is also, a little bit of angel funding. In the same thinking. So yes, I think it is. I think there are funders.
So there's individuals that do angel funding, and then there's also foundations that do it out of their PRIs. There's community foundations that might give it as a grant. There's multiple ways to get angel funding, but I think the challenge for all of you is to figure out your pitch to your funder.
Absolutely.
Don't say the exact same thing to every funder, because they're not looking to fund the exact same thing. They're looking to fund. PRIs are looking to fund from their impact portfolio, so you have to match what their impact portfolio is. Investors are looking to know if you have a business model, not necessarily a profit model, a business model. And I think the challenge that I've always seen with social entrepreneurs is you're selling me everything and not one thing. So I want to know where your priority of interest, and how are you going to build your business that you're sticking to your goal and not trying to do 50 other things at the same time. And that's always been, from what I've seen of social entrepreneurs, is you're selling the impact and the finance and something else at the same time, and you're trying to change the ecosystem, and that's not going to happen. So what are those things are you primarily going to do? There might be second order and third order effects, but you got to know what your business model is.
Just to add one quick thing. I get to see both sides of the world because I operate a venture fund for Capital One that is doing commercial investments, and then I'm the chairman of Venture Philanthropy Partners, which is a venture model for nonprofits. This kind of straddles both, and I think your point about business can take a bigger role, or how do we break out of silos? you know what I was thinking, we host angel investor nights in Arlington in our lab for, lots of startups, just to create the space, the meeting space for investors to come. We usually have a speaker. Last year we had Peter Thiel come out. And that is for startups, because we care about the ecosystem in DC. But honestly, now that we've got more exposure to this idea, the pitches we hear from you are the exact same that we would hear from anybody seeking funding. And maybe there's a way for us to put our heads together and think about how to organize a little better to get exposure. These are things I think you have to start to, they probably take an amount of time to start realizing there's this opportunity to invest in these types of social impact innovations.
And be on your A game. It's guaranteed there is an angel investor in this audience right now. Guaranteed. They're not going to raise their hand, but they're watching. So yeah, be on your A game every time you're pitching.
I had a question. My name is Mohini Malhotra, and I think, Frank, your comment was a perfect segue into my question, which is, I work with a lot of nonprofits in DC. I'm a social entrepreneur myself, and from a policy environment, regulatory question I have is there a business registration vehicle for social entrepreneurs that's a sweet spot between an NGO and all the benefits that you get from that, and an LLC for profit? And I feel, so sort of when you're out there, there's an ecosystem that's built around nonprofits. You have groups like Compass and lots of nonprofits set up to provide pro bono services, and it goes by your registration. But if you're a social impact company, and you're willing to trade off perhaps some of the profit for the social impact, what's the spot in between? Where's that ecosystem, and how would this report help sort of educate from a business registration perspective, but even from that ecosystem that gets educated about the in-between, somewhat blurry creature that we're talking about?
It's a great question. I mean, I think B Corps has done a fairly decent job of getting state-by-state legislations changed. And I think the Delaware change in allowing you to be a B Corp based in Delaware has certainly helped the process. It hasn't changed anything in policy, but at least changed kind of the thinking behind how do you make sure you have that. I think there's two aspects to this. One, it is the next generation of change to think about in policy, which is it the SBA? Is it you look at the preferences that you give government contractors, that if they are considered a social enterprise or have these features, that's what it looks like? The alternative to that is we have to figure out the metrics, right? Somebody's going to have to start reporting that we're measuring against something, because if you're going to make the trade-off, we got to know what the trade-off is.
And
that's a risk assessment mechanism of what's the risk I'm taking in order to get the social impact, but I've got to know what that is. So I think we have to do those simultaneously. I don't think we have to do it linear, in a singular way, but I think we can do it simultaneously. One is getting people to start reporting, making that real, and then the second is really thinking about where are the small policy changes, not the big policy changes that could actually lead to some of these preferential treatments, other things that can happen.
Just to quickly, I think that was a great point. There's a great study that came out recently by Stanford about social impact and investing and getting really clear on intent. And you mentioned this, Sheila, about what are you really trying to achieve, and whether you financially straddle a certain line. If you come to me and say, make a commercially kind of not attractive investment, but I'm going to achieve other things, or I'm going to create kind of almost a for-profit, you get a great rate of return. Those are really different messages, and either may work, but if you kind of blur the lines, I think it could impair the story, versus telling me, probably not, kind of the highest rate of return, but I'm going to achieve these other big things, and that makes sense.
Hi, is that on? Yeah. My name is Constantine. I actually have a startup at a 1776 incubator called MentorSpace that helps educational institutions leverage their alumni to create meaningful career mentorship programs. And actually probably will be applying to Halcyon for the next round. So thank you for putting on this great panel, and this is really inspiring. But I wanted to ask kind of a fun out there question, which was about, theoretically the investor landscape has changed a lot with the Jobs Act and the micro investors, theoretically. But I wanted to find out if you guys had heard or seen any kind of interesting application of this new kind of micro investing opportunities for the social impact investing ecosystem.
I don't. Yeah. Anybody? Well, no. I just have not seen. I haven't seen a lot of. It's relatively new, I think, but I have not seen a lot of impact yet. but that doesn't mean it won't be to come, because I think we're still kind of in early days, if I'm interpreting your question right. I mean, anybody have any
that's
actual...
right, but I mean, I think the crowdfunding space is super interesting to watch. And so I think some of the changes will help accelerate that and make it easier to crowdfund equity. And so let's watch it. And particularly for diversifying the space, women do better in crowdfunding. So I think it's just going to be, it's an interesting thing to watch. But I also don't have anything to be like, yes, the greatest thing that just
Well, I mean,
happens.
interestingly, the rules just changed also for private equity investments, so you don't have to be an accredited investor to do that. And I think we will see things come out for any type of private equity investing that are going to allow retail investors. You can decide whether this is a good or a bad thing. I don't make, that make these smaller types of investments in early stage startups that previously really weren't accessible, and that may have an impact on the VC world generally, in this world in particular.
I don't think I've seen anything, but I think there's things that are interesting to look at. So the community notes that Calvert is doing, especially in Chicago, is a very interesting idea of allowing individual investors to come in and invest it along Benefit Chicago and what the MacArthur Foundation's trying to do. So I think that's a really interesting idea. I think we've seen sort of this crowdfunding stuff online before in terms of lending, giving people loans, and then allowing you to decide the interest rate that you're going to charge. I think it got squashed during the time when we were trying to figure out the crowdfunding requirements and after the financial crisis. But I think there were those interesting models that are sitting out there. It would be very interesting how crowdfunding legislation gets reviewed and what people decide to do with it and where they're going to take those risks along the way. But watch the fintech space, because they're playing some of that game right now, which is trying to figure out how to do some of that. So I don't think it's that we haven't seen it. It's just that it's either in fintech or it's in loans or it's kind of these community notes. Right. But there's little things that are happening that are starting to pop up, and some of those are going to start taking hold.
Time for one more? One more? Last one. The lucky winner.
Good one.
I'm going to start at this end.
Can't we start with the guy?
To just, Bill, do you have a cogent answer? I have no answer for this.
That is such a good question. I think I don't actually know. I'm not going to have a good answer for you, so I'm going to just proclaim that now. But I have been watching Senator Warner in Virginia, who is trying to work through some tax, incentives, basically. And so I think the game is in the tax incentive space. I just don't know what the exact policy is. But it's absolutely going to be there, and that will be both an attraction of talent and companies and ideas and entrepreneurs, and he's actually proposing legislation. So, and there certainly is a guy who knows how to get legislation through. And so I think it'll be interesting to watch at the state level, because I think it'll move first at the state level, and then whether that will ladder up to some sort of national policy. But I think the action will be in tax and at the state level.
I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have three ways of thinking about this. One, tax policy, absolutely, at the state and the national level, to think about preferential treatment and how you do procurement. So if you say you prefer somebody that would be a B Corp, it changes the way you think about procurements, and if B Corps apply, they get a chance in the process. And it doesn't have to be only at the federal level, it can be at the state and local levels. Frankly, companies could do this too, which is to say, we're going to procure from B Corp companies as a preferential treatment when they do their bidding process, even within a company itself. And the third, I think B Corp's also got to figure this out a little bit. 250 indicators is a lot of indicators to become a B Corp. So how do you make it easier for people to become B Corps, or at least find a pathway to it? Because it's not just that there's not enough the legislation out there. It's like there's not enough B Corps out there. And so you're going to have to fulfill all of these requirements if someone gives you a big contract. And do you have the ability to do it and meet 250 metrics? So I think at some point we're going to have to answer that question, because the pipeline is not that big.
Right. No. I was going to say that, but you beat me to it, so we'll stop on that answer. Look, I just want to close out again. We have incredible fellows entering this program. Good luck to all of you. This has been a wonderful panel. I appreciate being a part of it, being able to listen to your wonderful answers. And the rest of you have a great day.
All righty. Just very quickly, we are almost there, and we're almost ready outside. Just two quick things. So this day wouldn't be possible without an incredibly hardworking team at SNR Foundation. So just want to give my colleagues a big round of applause for putting this together. And a specific shout out to the two people on the Halcyon Incubator team, Takayo and Mike, who have both been incredible. So if you haven't got a chance to meet them yet, please say hello. Mike's actually just joining us as of 2 weeks ago. So say hello to him and welcome him to the team. And to give a last closing thought before Lao Food, before cupcakes and coffee, it's the incredible reason we're all here today. The president, co-founder, and CEO of SNR Foundation, Dr. Sachiko Kuno.
Thank you very much, Ryan, and thank you so much all for coming today. That's such a wonderful day, and for me, and it's almost overwhelming. And because only the 2 years ago when we started the Halcyon Incubator, no one knows what will be happening in 2 years later. So amazing thing. And also I would like to thank all supporters from the beginning, especially panelists and Frank, everybody that support me, and Kate and Ryan, even from the beginning. I think that's the Halcyon Incubator itself, a kind of startup program. So that's 2 years ago. No one knows how the very early stage for us. However, so many people and who believe in me and believe in Kate, believe in Halcyon Incubator, the potential, and to support continuously from the beginning. I really appreciate. Thank you so much again. So my name is Sachiko Kuno, and co-founder, CEO of SNR Foundation. And I came from Japan 20 years ago to establish biotech company together with another co-founder, Ryuji Ueno. So that is the kind of venture. And because we started about a company from two of us, and to grow and up to the 150 people and listed in the NASDAQ. So that is a really the wonderful and journey for me and for Ryuji. However, what we learned and what we saw from the beginning, early stage is very critical. And without support to the early stage, not necessarily the financial support, but also the advisory or mentoring or encouragement to the early stage startup people, I think that is very critical for us to be creating a real innovative world. And so that without that, no one can change the world. So that we are very much lucky to have such an incredible group of supporters here for this program. Each of you is a part of this journey. Thank you so much for your commitment to making the world the better world. And we will now have some coffee and cupcakes, and of course, yes, Lao food. And aside for everyone, we encourage you to stay here and to network with the incredible fellows in this program. And especially as many people already mentioned about DC. DC is a wonderful ecosystem city already for the social impact issues. However, funding is still weak. So that we need to improve funding issues to make the DC the wonderful city for the social impact. So think about investment as well. Thank you so much.